All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Kate Mueller. For those of you who don't know me, I am the Chief Product Owl and Resident Cheesemonger here at KnowledgeOwl. And this is the first of what will probably be a two-part series of Wisdom Wednesdays. Might be three. There's a lot to talk about with versions, so we might get into more of that. But today, what I'm mostly going to walk through is what I would consider kind of a high-level overview of what kind of change history KnowledgeOwl naturally tracks versus what tools you have available to you to kind of better control when changes in your content go live or create a history of content changes that will stay forever or a variety of other things. So before I get too far into this, let me share my screen so I don't forget to do that. Okay, so broadly speaking, what I'm going to talk about today sort of touches on three functions that I think a lot of us who are very avid content creators run into quite a bit. One of those is the ability to recover content that you might have improperly deleted or edited. The second is being able to kind of view history of content and retain history of that content, whether it's for compliance purposes or just, for historical, what did we used to call that thing? And the third would be kind of prepping changes to your content and having total control over when you publish them. So naturally, when you create a new article in KnowledgeOwl and you start to make changes to it, if that article is published, as soon as you hit save, those changes are live and visible to the folks who are engaging with your knowledge base. We automatically track those changes in what we call revisions. So in this upper right-hand section underneath the save button, you'll see the section that says when it was last saved, who saved it, and how many recent revisions there are. We only save the 10 most recent revisions. So this is a sort of like, oh God, what just happened there? I better go back and get that thing that I recently changed kind of thing. But we will capture a separate revision every time you save a change to the text of an article. So if I add or remove a paragraph down here, I swap out a screenshot, I make fixes to typos, all of that is captured as a revision. You can access the revisions for an article at any time by clicking that recent revisions link. And it will give you a list of up to 10 revisions here. And the way that this layout is structured is that you have the option to compare revisions to each other. So very often you'll be doing something like, I want to compare maybe my most recent revision to the last revision I did here and see the difference. And it will provide you with some highlighting around what has changed, whether stuff has been added or removed. So this is a terrible example because I didn't change text in here. Let me go back slightly further. Here we go. So one of these has a whole bunch of text that the other one does not. You can choose to recover back to this older revision by clicking the recover revision button. That will load all of the content from that previous revision back into the editor. You can choose to make edits to it or save it. And at that point, you can effectively recover back to a previous state. However, these built-in revisions have a whole lot of limitations. The first of those being that we only save 10 of them. So if you have gone in and made a whole bunch of small edits as separate saves, you won't be able to go far enough back to actually see the content that came back. And you also have no control over these. Like we save the 10 most recent. Sometimes that means that you've got content that goes back 6 months. Sometimes it means you've got content that goes back 2 hours. And because we are constantly only saving the 10 most recent, you'll age out a lot of that content. So revisions are great as a like, oops, I did something I shouldn't have done. What happened? I didn't mean to delete those 3 paragraphs. Where'd they go? Let me go get those. But they're not great for things like long-term history, keeping records of what your documentation contained for a compliance purpose or some other evaluation or legal claim. So they're like a great built-in backup, and we do them automatically. You don't have to think about them. They take no effort on your part. So I like to think of them as the like, ooh, that's the thing that might save me from myself if I just did something awful. Um, the much more nuanced, useful history here that you do have complete control over is that you can create new versions of articles. So in KnowledgeOwl speak, when you first create an article, we automatically create that as version 1.00. And if you've been making edits within the editor, all of the changes that you make are within version 1.00. But you can at any point create a new version. We support being able to, we have a couple automatic numbering versions. So minor version will take the current version number and add 0.01 to it. Major versions will take the current number and add 1.0 to them. You can also do custom versions and create versions that have a name or a numbering scheme that matters to you. Reasons that versions are incredibly important. One, you can create them whenever you want. So any amount of edits that you make that feel important, that might be a good time to create a new version. Two, we don't delete them. We will store them as long as you want to store them. So if you want to create a historical record of every significant edit you made for the last 5 years, if you created versions every time you did that, we will have that complete record. You can access it at any time. Three, you get to decide when a new version is considered done and activate it. And it is only at that point, once you activate the version, that the folks interacting with your knowledge base will see that new content. So it gives you far greater control if you want to stage changes to your documentation, whether that's because you have a new product or a new release coming out, whether it's because you've just decided to totally change, maybe the template you use and how you're structuring your content. And you want to be able to make a bunch of changes and test them out before they go live without having the embarrassment of them looking kind of weird or halfway in progress to your readers. So versions give you a great deal more control over saving that history and also deciding when you are going to go live with the changes that you're making. So I've thrown some terminology at y'all and I haven't explained it very well. So when we first create this version 1.00, that version is what's considered the active version. That means that if it is published, the content of that version is what people will see in the live knowledge base. So in this case, I have this article that's got, a handful of paragraphs and a screenshot. And if I go view that article in my live knowledge base, I will see exactly what that is because this is my current active version. When you create additional versions, there are what we call inactive versions, which means that they really only exist on the editor side of KnowledgeOwl. They don't generally exist in the live knowledge base. There are ways to make them exist in the live knowledge base, but they don't by default exist out there. So you can create as many of these as you want. You can do all the crazy edits you want to do. None of your readers are going to see them until you decide that you want to activate that version. You can only have one active version at a time. So it gives you very strong control over what's going out. And let me hop into one of these other versions. So you'll see I've got totally different screenshot here. I think the text is otherwise fairly similar. And I can choose at this point to say, okay, I'm ready to pull the trigger on these changes. I'm going to activate this version. At this point, this is the version of content that my readers will see. So if I come out here and refresh, my other screenshot goes away. I get the new screenshot. I get all of the content there. But behind the scenes, I still retain the full history of what that original version was. It stays down here in version 1.00. I can also switch back to it by activating that version again if I realize that I really messed something up here, and continue to make some edits and then come back and reactivate version 2.00. We offer a few sort of additional functionalities around versions. Version notes are one of these. So these can be great if you are using versions either for historical records or because you're making substantive edits. Adding a few notes about why you created the new version, hugely helpful. Tip number 2, and I can tell you this because it is a workflow that I mess up repeatedly myself. So I might come in and say, oh, I just want to fix like a tiny typo here. And I think that's all I want to do. And so I'm like, all right, that's all I'm going to do. I'll probably hit save. And then I look and I realize, oh, wow, there's actually way more edits that I want to make here. If I try to create a new version at this point, it's going to give me this nice big warning that says, hey, you made a bunch of changes that you never actually saved. What do you want us to do with those? We can save them into the original active version of the article, which will update what people are currently seeing, or we can discard those changes, which means that your current article will stay untouched, but we'll also get rid of all the edits you just made. If you are like me and you forget to start to create the new version originally, my recommendation here is that you cancel out of this completely, come in either in the editor or the code view of the editor, copy it, like everything that you've got, or at least the section that you changed, and then start to create your new version. At this point, you can discard whatever the changes were, and you can come in and like copy and paste, rather paste whatever you copied back in. So you didn't actually lose anything, but you also did not change whatever that live version was. Let's see. Aside from that, from a workflow perspective, there are other elements of this which we will talk about in the next Wisdom Wednesday around being able to review that content before it goes live. So you can actually push it out to certain readers who belong to certain reader groups so that they can see it in the live KB. If you are trying to do some content review processes, that's going to be the showcase of our next Wisdom Wednesday session. The other thing I would point out here is versions are very powerful, and they're also one of the features that I think having established guidelines, usage guidelines around them is incredibly important. I have seen cases where expectations around versions have not been incredibly well communicated. So I've seen cases where certain editors will never create versions and they will only make changes to the current active version. And then other people on the same team might be creating a new version every time that they need to make an edit. So it's very worth spending a little bit of time, if you are not a solo writer, talking through the ways that you want to use versions. When is it appropriate to create a new version versus when is it okay to edit the thing in place? Are you using the built-in major or minor versioning functions, or are you using custom versions? And if you are using custom versions, do you have some kind of naming or numbering convention that you want to use? With this in mind, there is a resource out in our support knowledge base that I would strongly encourage folks to use. We have this sort of like best practice guide on creating version guidelines. This includes what I would consider to be kind of the basic levels of what you should be including in a set of guidelines that you're trying to establish for versions. So for me, that tends to be, when should I create a new version versus when shouldn't I? Like, is it okay for me to not create a new version if I'm just making typo fixes? Or should I create one then? Should I use minor versions? Should I use major versions? Should I use custom versions? And when should I use the version notes field? How should I use the version notes field? And if we are doing some kind of review process before we activate those versions, what does that process look like? Like, what are the steps? Who has to be involved? Where does it need to go? This is a really great thing to just lay out so that you've got consistency in how people are using versions, because they are so powerful. But if your expectation is that a version is going to capture a history of content for compliance purposes, and then one person on your team never uses them, you're not going to be able, with a compliance request, to say, here's exactly what our documentation looked like on this date, because you won't have the history. It will have aged out from the revisions that we automatically save for you because you didn't have those established versions. So I think personally, the way that we approach this within the support knowledge base is to say, if it's a relatively small edit, so you're fixing a typo, you're changing some wording, it's not substantively changing the content or the screenshot of the content, we don't do a new version there. We will do a minor version for small changes like, ooh, I've got to update screenshots because we changed the way that this looks. Or I would really like to have a warning for that thing and move it to a different part of the document. We'll use major versions for things like, wow, we totally changed the look and feel of this, or the functionality. We moved some of the stuff from this page somewhere else. This is not going to look anything like it used to. we will use major versions for that. We don't actually use custom versions currently because we don't have anything to tie them to. We don't use version numbers when we release, so there's not an important real world thing for us to tie custom version numbers to. But having that clarity about it and then leveraging versions, they're fantastic. If you're thinking about, I'd really like to rework this article, like rearrange it, try out, maybe a new style on something, or, we've always done these as heading level 2s. What if some of this content was nested? Try it in a new version, experiment with it. And then if you really like it, you can take it active. And if you don't, you can delete it. The other power of versions. So all of these have a little X next to them. You can choose to delete those from there, or there's an option near the top that gives you the option to delete this version from here. Either way, they give you sort of a safe space to test out some edits, and then you can decide when you want to take those edits live. All right, I'm going to pause there. Do we have any questions on this sort of like basic version functionality or the difference between revisions and versions that came up while I was blathering on?
No questions here.
Excellent. Thanks, Travis. If it's not clear, I love versions. As like a content writer, I love versions. I think being able to control when they go live is incredibly important. I use this feature a great deal. So we try to prep a lot of our support knowledge-based documentation in advance of our releases so that as soon as we release, we can take that documentation live. So I end up using versions a lot for that, to be able to be like, ooh, let me take some screenshots from our QA environment and make sure that all of this looks updated and correct. But I don't want to touch the live stuff that everybody's still using because this release isn't going out for 3 days. Versions, definitely my best friend in that case. All right. Excellent. I'm glad it's been useful for you that way too, Travis. It's I love it. It is one of my favorite features.
No, it has saved my butt many times if I've vandalized my own article, if I've needed to roll back changes. It's one of those features I didn't know I could have before we transitioned to you guys, which I would say makes you guys stand out quite a bit. It seems like an afterthought. A lot of the other knowledge-based products out there, they don't seem to have that, and it made me realize that what we were using was kind of like Fisher Price, my first knowledge management solution, I guess, by comparison.
It's interesting the number of tools that want to treat it as, oh, just create a new article for that. And you're like, but I don't want to create it. Like, I've already got cross references to this. I've already got like a permalink that I really like. I don't want to have to create a new thing just to update content when I want to update it. It is in some ways like a very odd bias that a lot of the tools have. Thankfully, not a bias that we share. All right, I will